the behavior of others to get what it wants. And so he says there are three ways you can do that. There's coercion or sticks, there's payments, inducements or carrots, and there's attraction or soft power. If you have the ability to attract others through your cultural assets, your values, your foreign policies, then you can economize on the sticks and the carrots. Now take this country, for instance, and Mohandas has already alluded to this. The US has traditionally been a haven for immigrants, the land of the American dream, the promise that anyone can be anything if they work hard enough here. It's also the home of Boeing and Intel, of Google and Apple, of Microsoft and MTV, Hollywood and Disneyland, Diet Coke and Levi's jeans, McDonald's and Starbucks. In short, some of the most recognizable and influential brands and industries around the world. The attractiveness of these assets and of the American lifestyle they represent is that they enable the US to persuade rather than compel others to adopt its agenda. Indeed, while the US has used officially sponsored initiatives from the Voice of America to the Fulbright scholarships to promote its soft power around the world, arguably Hollywood and MTV have done far more to promote the idea of America as a desirable and admirable society than the US, or than any US governmental endeavor could have done. So soft power, in other words, is only created partly by governments and partly despite governments, partly by deliberate action, partly by accident. That's why it used to be said that even the demonstrators outside American embassies around the world were chanting, "Yankee, go home, but take me with you." Now, in this sense, soft power acts both as an alternative and a complement to hard power. Soft power is what people think about a country as soon as they hear its name mentioned. Hard power is what they feel when they confront a country. Hard power is exercised, soft power is evoked. Now, at TED, I had spent some time discussing the profound transformations India has gone through in recent decades, the importance of connectivity, for example, and the overall design of the country's soft power. Because in today's information era, we have a country now where almost every Indian owns a cell phone. Just last year, we've crossed 1 billion mobile subscriptions, making us the second largest group of mobile users anywhere in the world, after China, but we're growing faster than China. And this, as I mentioned then, has resulted in the empowerment of the underclass and in its own way helped develop India's soft power capabilities. Technology has transformed the lives of ordinary people, of the Aam Aadmi. I'd mentioned how fishermen in India are now equipped with cellular devices. Fishermen, for example, returning with they have GPS that shows them where the best shoals of fish are. Once they catch the fish and they're returning, they can call any market town along the coast on their mobile phones to find out where they'll get the best price and make an informed decision where to sell their catch. Now, I mention this because in today's world of instant mass communications, enabled by the internet, countries are increasingly judged by a global public fed on an incessant diet of internet news, televised images, videos taken on the cell phones of passers-by and zapped around on WhatsApp, email gossip. Now, this has significant implications, including the fact that countries can no longer monopolize official information and that their use of hard power is more scrutinized than ever. Now, the 16th anniversary of 9/11 is just 3 days away. The outpouring of goodwill for Washington in the wake of 9/11. I think of Le Monde's famous assertion, "We're all Americans now," which actually echoed something I'd said on CNN the very same night when I said we're all New Yorkers now. And the squandering of that goodwill by America's over-reliance on hard power in the invasion and occupation of Iraq and the related global war on terror are instructive. The steep decline, for example, in America's image and standing is a direct reflection of global distaste for the instruments of American hard power at that time. The Iraq invasion, Guantanamo, Abu Ghraib, torture, rendition, Blackwater's killings of Iraqi civilians, all of this drumbeat of bad news, one after the other. And so the existing soft power assets of the US clearly proved inadequate to compensate for the deficiencies of its hard power approach. Fans of American culture were not prepared to overlook the excesses of Guantanamo. Using Microsoft Windows does not predispose you in favor of extraordinary rendition. So the misuse of hard power can undermine your soft power around the world. Now, what does this mean for India? It means acknowledging that India's claims to a global leadership role in the 21st century lie in the aspects and products of Indian society and culture that the world finds attractive. These assets may not directly persuade others to support India, but they go a long way towards enhancing India's intangible standing in the world's eyes. Now, the roots of India's soft power run deep. India's is a civilization that over millennia has offered refuge and, more important, religious and cultural freedom to Jews. Mohandas mentioned the story, Parsis, it's an even better story, several varieties of Christians and Muslims. Every imaginable faith or creed flourished here. Indeed, the British historian E.P. Thompson wrote that our heritage of diversity is what makes India the most important country for the future of the world. And I quote him here, all the convergent influences of the world, he wrote, run through this society. There is not a thought that is being thought in the West or the East that is not active in some Indian mind. Now, I'm glad a Brit said that and not an Indian, but that Indian mind has been shaped by remarkably diverse forces. Ancient Hindu tradition, myth and scripture, the impact of Islam and Christianity, and 2 centuries of British colonial rule. The result is unique. Though there are some who think and speak of India as a Hindu Rashtra, the Indian civilization that we see today is an evolved hybrid. We are a land of rich diversities. I've observed in the past in some of my books and writings that we are all minorities in India. This land imposes no narrow conformities on its citizens. You can be many things and one thing. You can be a good Muslim, a good Keralite, and a good Indian all at once. So the idea of India is of one land embracing many. It's the idea that Indians can endure differences of caste, creed, color, culture, cuisine, conviction, custom and costume, and still rally around a consensus. And that democratic consensus around the simple principle that in a large, diverse democracy like ours, you don't really need to agree all the time, except on the ground rules of how you will disagree. Acceptance of difference, rather than mere tolerance, has been the great Indian secret. And that has been the strength of Indian soft power. We've always managed to maintain consensus on how to manage without consensus. As I've said before, India isn't a melting pot like America, it's a thali, a collection of dishes on a platter. Each dish tastes different. It's in its own bowl, so it doesn't necessarily flow into the next, but they all belong together on the same plate, and they complement each other in making the meal a satisfying repast. That's what India is all about. Water? I have somebody else's water here, but I wouldn't mind one of my own. Sorry, thanks. No, that's not mine. That's somebody's left over here. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you. So, since I mentioned the thali, let me say that cuisine is an area of soft power influence. The French have long known that the way to someone's heart is through his palate. The late British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook once said that Britain's national dish was no longer fish and chips, it was chicken tikka masala. UK curry houses today employ more people than the coal mining, shipbuilding, and iron and steel industries combined, so the empire can strike back. But India's soft power is not just what is represented by the allure of biryani, Bollywood, and Bhangra, the kinds of things I did speak about at that TED conference 8 years ago. Rather, even more important are the values and principles for which India stands. After all, Mahatma Gandhi won India its independence through the use of soft power because nonviolence and satyagraha were indeed classic users of soft power, of moral force, before those terms were even coined. India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, was also a skilled exponent of soft power. He developed a role for India in the world based entirely on its civilizational history and moral standing, making India the voice of the oppressed and the marginalized against the big power hegemons of the day. This gave the country enormous standing and prestige across the world and strengthened our own self-respect as we stood, proud and independent, on the world stage. But of course, soft power comes with its own set of limitations, as Nehru himself was unfortunate enough to have witnessed during his time. The greatest flaw in Nehru's approach was that his soft power was unrelated to the acquisition of hard power. As the humiliation of the military defeat by China in 1962 demonstrated, soft power has crippling limitations in national security terms. Because instead of Theodore Roosevelt's famous maxim, speak softly and carry a big stick, Nehru's India spoke loudly but carried no stick at all. In a tough neighborhood, the rhetoric of peace can only take you so far. Soft power becomes credible when there is hard power behind it. That's why the US has been able to make so much of its soft power. Recent Indian history offers a somewhat mixed picture when it comes to the effective use of hard power. Within our own subcontinent, India is often caught in a cleft stick on such matters. It often treads softly in its anxiety not to come across as an Asian bully. And in so doing, it emboldens those who are prepared to test it. As a result, it has been noticeably reluctant to evolve a strategic doctrine based on hard power. There is a sense in which most Indians still think that would be unseemly. This is also sometimes perceived to be the case by foreigners, which may help explain the recent Chinese probe into the Doklam Plateau in Bhutan. Fortunately, India's swift and effective response, coupled with skillful diplomacy, resolved that episode. Now, of course, New Delhi knows that its soft power cannot solve its security challenges. After all, an Islamist terrorist who enjoys a Bollywood movie will still have no compunction about setting off a bomb in a Delhi market. We've known that to happen. The US already learned that the perpetrators of 9/11 ate their last dinner at a McDonald's. To counter the threat of terrorism, there is no substitute for hard power. But India knows that soft power lasts longer and has a wider, more self-reinforcing reach. For China and Russia, kung fu movies or the Bolshoi Ballet will win more admirers internationally than the People's Liberation Army or Siberian oil reserves, even if in each case it is what the state relies on. The latter is what the state relies on. Hard power without soft power stirs up resentments and enmities. Soft power without hard power is a confession of weakness. We need both, what Hillary Clinton, no longer quoted much, dubbed smart power. Yet hard power tends to work better domestically rather than internationally. An autocratic state is not concerned about having a soft power narrative for its own people, but without one, it has little with which to acquire the goodwill of the rest of the world. Whether it's the Chinese in Tibet or the Russians in Ukraine, it can be said that in each case, a major military power won the hard power battle, but lost the soft power war. Where soft power works in security terms is in attracting enough goodwill from ordinary people around the world to reduce the sources of support and succor that the terrorists enjoy, and without which they cannot function. Now, India's soft power has held up well in today's globalizing world. Globalization has both sparked and allayed many Indians' fears that economic liberalization will bring with it cultural imperialism of a particularly insidious kind, that Game of Thrones and burgers will supplant Garba and Bhelpuri, But instead, India's experience with Western consumer products has demonstrated convincingly that we can drink Coca-Cola without becoming Coca-colonized. Indians will not become any less Indian if, in Mahatma Gandhi's famous metaphor from more than 70 years ago, we open the doors and windows of our country and let foreign winds blow through our house, because Indians are strong enough not to be blown off our feet by these winds. Our popular culture has proved resilient enough to compete successfully with MTV and McDonald's. Besides, the strength of Indianness lies in many ways in its ability to absorb foreign influences and to transform them by peculiarly Indian alchemy into something that belongs naturally on the soil of India. Like McDonald's selling McTikkie burgers now. That's how we transform global products. But indeed, from the export of Bollywood to Bhangra, India has demonstrated that it's a player in globalization, not merely a subject of it. India benefits from the future and the past, from the international appeal of its traditional practices, from Ayurveda to yoga, both accelerating in popularity across the globe, and the transformed image of the country created by its thriving diaspora, the in-diaspora that is sitting here, so well represented here. Now, though recent years have witnessed India's growing consciousness of its soft power, we still lack the more systematic development of a soft power strategy. So far, such strategic advantages that have accrued from India's soft power, goodwill for our country amongst African, Arab, and Afghan publics, for instance, has been a largely unplanned byproduct of the normal emanations of Indian culture. The popularity of Indian movies and TV shows in these parts of the world, for instance. Such goodwill has not been systematically harnessed as a strategic asset by New Delhi. It's ironic that in and around the 2008 Beijing Olympics, authoritarian China showed a greater determination to use its hard power strengths to cultivate a soft power strategy for itself on the world stage. India will not need to try as hard, but will need to do more than it currently does to leverage its natural soft power into a valuable instrument of its global strategy. Some promising beginnings